Good morning, crime community. I got my wallet yesterday. I'm just going to read out a little bit of Poe today. Old English poetry. It should not be doubted that at least 1/3 of the affection with which we regard the older poets of Great Britain should be attributed to what is, in itself, a thing apart from poetry. We mean to the simple love of the antique, and that again, 1/3 of even the proper poetic sentiment inspired by the writing should be ascribed to the fact which, while it was strict connection with poetry in the abstract and with the old British poems themselves, should not be looked upon as a merit appertaining to the authors of the poems. Almost every devout admirer of the old bards, it demanded their opinion of their productions, would mention vaguely yet with perfect sincerity a sense of dreamy, wild, indefinite, and he would perhaps say indefinable delight. On being required to point out the source of this so shadowy pleasure, he would be apt to speak of the quaint in phraseology and in general handling. The quaintiness is, in fact, a very powerful adjunct to ideology, but in the case in question, it arises independently of the author's will and is altogether a part of his intention. Words and their rhythm have varied. Verses which affect us today with a vivid delight, and which delight in many instances may be traced to one source, quaintness, must have worn in those days of their construction a very commonplace air. This is, of course, no argument against the poems now. We mean it only as against the poets then. This is a growing desire to overrate them. The Old English muse was frank, guileless, sincere, and although very learned, still learned without art. No general error evinces the more thorough confusion of ideas than the error of supposing Donne and Crowley metaphysical in the sense wherein Wordsworth and Coleridge are so. With the two former, ethics were the end, with the two latter, the means. The poet of creation wished, by highly artificial verse, to inculcate what he supposed to be moral truth. The poet of the ancient mariner to infuse the poetic sentiment which channels suggested by analysis. The one finished by complete failure that he commenced in the grossest misconception, the other by a path which could not possibly lead him astray, arrived at a triumph which is not the less glorious because hidden from the profane eye of the multitude. In this view, even the metaphysical verse of Crowley, but in evidence of the simplicity and single-heartedness of the man, and he was in this but a type of his school, for we may as well designate on this way the entire class of writers whose poems are bound up in the volumes before us, and throughout all of whom we runs a very perceptible general character and used little art in composition. With writing sprang immediately from the soul and partook immensely of what soul mature. Nor is it difficult to perceive the tendency of this abandon to elevate immeasurably all the energies of mind, but again so to mingle the greatest possible fire, force, delicacy, and all good things with the lowest possible bathos, baldness, and imbecility, as to render it not a matter of doubt that the average results of mind in such a school will be found inferior to those results in one's carteles paribus more artificial. We cannot bring ourselves to believe that the selection of the Book of Gems are such as will impart to a poetical reader the clearest possible idea of the beauty of the school, if it is the intention has been merely to show the school's character. The attempt might have been considered successful in the highest degree. There are long passages now before us of the most despicable trash, which no merit whatsoever beyond what is their antiquity. The criticisms of the editor do not particularly please us. The enthusiasm is too general and too vivid not to be false. His opinion, for example, of Sir Henry Wotton verses on the Queen of Bohemia, that there are few finer things in our language as untenable and absurd. In such lines, we can perceive not one of those higher attributes of poesy which belong to her in all circumstances and throughout all time. Here, everything is art, nakedly but awkwardly concealed. No prepossession for the mere antique, and in this case, we can imagine no other prepossession should induce us to dignify with the sacred name of poetry a series such as this of elaborate and threadbare compliments, stitched apparently together without fancy, without plausibility, and without even attempt of adaptation. In common with all the world, we have much delighted with The Shepherd's Hunting by Wither, a poem partaking in a remarkable degree of the peculiarities of the second penseroso. Speaking of poesy, the author says, by the murmur of a spring, or the least boughs rustling, by a daisy whose leaves spread, shut when Titan goes to bed, or a shady bush or tree, he should more infuse on me than all nature's beauties can, in some other wiser man. By her help I also know make this cherished place allow something that may sweeten gladness in the very gall of sadness. The dull loneliness, the black shade, and these hanging vaults have made the strange music of the waves, beating in the hollow caves. This black den which rocks emboss, overgrown the eldest moss, the rude portals that give light more to terror than delight. Then my chamber of neglect, walked around with disrespect. From all these and their dull air, a fit object of despair, she hath taught me by her might to draw comfort and delight. But these lines, however good, do not bear with them much of the general character of the English antique. Some more of this will be found in Corbett's Rewards and Fairies. We copy a portion of Marvell's Maiden Lamenting for Her Fawn, which we prefer not only as a specimen of the elder poets, but in herself as a beautiful poem abounding in pathos, exquisitely delicate imagination, and truthfulness to anything of its species. It is a wondrous thing how fleet 'twas on those little silver feet, with what a pretty skipping grace it oft would challenge me the race, and when T had left me far away, T would stay and run away and stay. For it was a nimbler much than hinds, and trod as if in the four winds. I have a garden of my own, but so with roses overgrown, and lilies that you would it guess to be a little wilderness, and all the springtime of the year it only loved to be there. Among the beds of lilies I have sought it oft, where it would lie, you would not tell itself would rise. First it, although before mine eyes, for in the flaxen lily's shade, and like the bank of lilies laid, upon the roses it would feed, upon its lips even seem to bleed, and then to me it would boldly trip, and print those roses on my lip. But all its chief delight was still with roses thus itself to fill, and its pure virgin limbs to fold, the whitest sheets of lilies cold. It had lived long, it would have been lilies without, roses within. How truthful an air of lamentation hangs here upon every syllable. It pervades all. It comes over the sweet melody of the words, over the gentleness and the grace which we fancy in the little maiden herself, even over the half playful, half petulant air with which she lingers in the beauties and the good qualities of her favorite, like the cool shadow of the summer cloud over a bed of lilies and violets and all the sweet flowers, the whole of redolent of poetry of a very lofty order. Every line is an idea conveying either the beauty and the playfulness of the fawn or the artfulness of the maiden, of her love, of her admiration, of her grief, of her fragrance and warmth and appropriateness, of the little nest-like bed of lilies and roses which the fawn devoured as it laid upon them and could scarcely be distinguished from them by once happy little damsel who went to seek her pet with an arch and rosy smile on her face. Consider the great variety of truthful and delicate thought in the few lines we have quoted. The wonder of the little maiden at her fleetness of her favorite, the little silver feet, the fawn challenging his mistress to the race with a pretty skipping grace, running on before and then with head turned back, awaiting her approach only to fly from it again. Can we not distinctly perceive all these things? How exceedingly vigorous, too, is the line, and trod as if on our four winds, a vigor apparent only when we keep in mind the artless character of the speaker and the 4 feet of the favorite, one for each wind. Then consider the garden of my own, so overgrown and tangled with roses and lilies as to be a little wilderness. The fawn loving to be there and there only. The maiden seeking it where it should lie, and not being able to distinguish it from the flowers until itself would rise. Thus, lying among the lilies like a bank of lilies, the loving to fill itself with roses, and its pure virgin limbs to fold the whitest sheets of lilies cold. And these things being its chief delights, and then the preeminent beauty and naturalist of the concluding lines, whose very hyperbole only renders them more truth to nature, and we consider the innocence, the artlessness, the enthusiasm, the passionate grief, and more passionate admiration of the bereaved child. Had it lived long, it would have been lilies without, roses within. That's the end of that verse. We will continue on tomorrow with some more verses. I think I will be reading tomorrow, possibly. Possibly go back to the Southern Literary Messenger, because this quotes about the same thing in the Southern Literary Messenger, but it's like 10 volumes, but it will cover half of what Poe just said. So if there's any truth and like in what I'm saying and enjoying here, please like and subscribe and share, and have a nice day.